Hello, my name is Rachel, and I donated my kidney to a stranger about 2 months ago. I ultimately decided to donate a kidney because I saw the value of someone's life and how it's not dependent on my relation to them. As a non-directed donor, I had no control over who my recipient was, but when I started the process, as soon as I just made the decision that I was going to do this, I had this feeling that I was donating to a young boy. Regardless of whether that was right or not, it really gave me this peace and passion about what I was doing, and just the sense that there was a beautiful purpose, and that the recipient was someone just as important as the young men in my life. And having had three friends who all died at the age of 17, it was really important to me that it went to someone young and important and as equally loved. And I just knew that from the moment I started the process, that is exactly who it was going to be going to. My family worried that one day maybe one of them would need a kidney, or that maybe one day I would need a kidney. And I helped them understand that this was a really small concern, especially in our family, as no one in our family has any kidney issues. But in particular, I helped them understand that to me, donating to a stranger was equivalent to donating to someone in my family, that I felt as connected to this stranger out there as I felt to them. And I felt no obligation to prioritize any particular person over receiving my kidney. I also helped them understand that if I was in need of a kidney, would they not feel as hopeful that someone would step forward to donate a kidney as the family of my potential recipient feels right now? So I kind of put them in the shoes of, what if it was me who needed a kidney, but no one else was a match and some stranger stepped up? And that seemed to really help them understand where I was coming from and why this was important to me. It got harder for me when I actually woke up from surgery to find out that the transplant had failed, so the surgery wasn't able to proceed. That was beyond devastating. And what helped me get through it was honestly a combination of just an incredible healthcare team and the support of social workers and my family. It was really difficult when you sign up for this process, not knowing who your recipient is, going through a year of testing and all of the sacrifice around donating a kidney, only to find out that it wasn't going to do them any good, and that it wasn't going to help anyone. So I needed a lot of support, and I continue to need a lot of support since it's only been a few weeks. So I'm still growing, I'm still learning, and I'm still recovering, but I have absolutely no regrets about my decision. I found peace with my decision by remembering why I signed up to be a donor in the first place. A lot of it, when I first became a donor, was never about the success of the donation. It was just the opportunity to help someone, and particularly help someone who was young. And even though the transplant didn't work out, even though it didn't go to plan, that's where I had to source my peace from, was understanding that this wasn't just about a physical kidney. It was about this opportunity I had to give this family hope. And while there's a lot of details about this that I can't share, simply to protect the privacy of my recipient, one of the most beautiful moments to me was learning from the hospital staff that even though it didn't work out, even though none of it seemed to go to plan, this family was still incredibly grateful. And I may still have an incredible, long-lasting impact on their lives. But I also may never know. So despite everything that went wrong, I've sourced that peace from just knowing that I felt so called to do this, and that even if it didn't go to my plan, it still was meant to happen how it did. So even though I don't really like saying that all things happen for a reason, I do believe that all things happen as they are meant to be. And I've really found peace in that. Leading up to the procedure, I was really lucky. I didn't have a lot of stress. I think one of the benefits of being a non-directed donor is that you come to this decision completely on your own and when you're ready to do so. One of the more challenging things, and one of the things I actually recognized as a benefit of donating anonymously, is that no one's calling you to donate besides yourself. And so there's no urgency, there's no pressure. It's just about your process and your experience in that. So thankfully, by the time I got to donation, the only thing I was nervous about was the catheter, and they put that in once you're under for surgery. So I was really lucky in that the things that my brain chose to focus on didn't give me fear and didn't give me any stress. And then also the hospital staff were really supportive and just absolutely wonderful. I think kind of one of the scariest moments is when you first go into that operating room. And I remember my anesthesiologist looking over at me and she's like, what's your favorite band? So I told her Said the Whale. And she said, what's your favorite song from them? And so I don't even remember if I said a song. I think I just said to shuffle. So one of the nurses grabs her phone, opens Said the Whale, and just starts playing their music. And it was really wonderful. And just as I was falling asleep, I remember the anesthesiologist looking at me and just saying, like, I can't even remember fully what she said, but I remember just feeling so at peace. And it was really beautiful. And so I think that's one of the craziest things about the experience, especially those first few days in the hospital, is because of the medication that you're on. Your memory is often not the great. Your processing ability isn't the best. But it's still like this. It can be this beautiful process regardless of what happens. The best support system I had prior to donation was my partner, who helped me by believing what I said. I think one of the hardest things about being a non-directed donor is people really can question your motives and not understand at all why you're doing what you're doing. And he really supported me by just embracing my purpose and my understanding and my experience of what I was going through. And he was just absolutely wonderful in that and continues to be wonderful in that. Post-donation, the best support system I had was my social worker. As mentioned earlier in these videos, my donation failed. And because of that, I had a lot of psychological difficulty recovering after surgery. The first few days in the hospital were some of the hardest days of my life. And the social worker in the hospital, as well as my social worker outside of the hospital, were two of the most impactful healthcare workers that I've ever interacted with. The way they allowed me and supported me in reframing my experience and getting through the emotions of all of that while being heavily medicated. It was really beautiful. So combined, it's been those three people. While I was recovering at home, I was able to manage my responsibilities by relying heavily on my family. For my recovery, I stayed with my parents at my childhood home so that they could support me. They're both medical, so it helped a lot to have their support and just their comfort through the growing pains of recovery. Thankfully, it meant I really had people who supported me in resting. I think the number one thing to do when you're recovering is to do nothing. And you probably won't feel up to it. Give yourself the space to just lie down, relax, recover, take this time to really just focus on yourself. And that was the best I could do. And I took some time off work. So I really didn't have a ton of responsibilities, thankfully. And I think that played a large part in my recovery being quick and happy. I was back to my normal self approximately 8 to 10 weeks after the surgery. It took a little bit longer mentally than it did physically. I would say at 6 weeks physically, I felt pretty normal. I was able to go back to gently going into my regular activity. By 8 weeks, I was pretty much at my normal activity. While I would say I'm not 100% back at my normal strength, I would really say I'm basically at my normal self at this point. After donating a kidney, my health has not changed at all. When I share my story, I'm often asked if I regret my decision. This is particularly because my transplant failed, and that's obviously a big part of the story. So that question gets asked, and happily I can say that I do not regret it. Overall, what surprised me the most about this procedure was how fast my recovery was. I remember thinking day one after surgery that there is no way in 6 weeks I will be feeling normal. And at week 6, even at week 3, I was just shocked by how quickly my recovery went. The first few days are physically pretty tough. Your stomach is pretty swollen. I was pretty nauseous. You can be managing and learning how to manage the pain and understand what healthy pain is and all of those things. So the first few days were kind of tough, just figuring out what my new body limits were. And by week 3, I just felt like I was skyrocketing through my goals. And by week 6, I felt like I was soaring through my recovery physically. So one of the craziest things is just how quickly you recover from this. Looking back, the best part about donating a kidney was the lessons I learned about kindness. Even though my surgery failed, I've just absolutely transformed my outlook on life. I now just have this beautiful connection, I feel, to other people, strangers and not. I've just started realizing, I think prior to surgery, that I didn't necessarily appreciate the complexity of human life, and that all of us are as equally complex and ridiculous and hypocritical as each other. We're all in this weird existence together. And I think prior to donation, I didn't fully embrace that. And after donation, I just view strangers and the people around me as a completely different connection. I just feel like I'm a part of the human existence in a totally different way. What I discovered about myself during this experience is I learned a lot about how I process grief. Having lost people in the past and being familiar with grief, I didn't know that there was the potential of experiencing grief in relation to kidney donation. When my transplant failed, I felt this cavern almost open, and just all of the emotions of losing people in the past piled together. And I remember sitting in the hospital and saying, I feel like I'm sitting on a fence. And depending on how I choose to perceive this and how I choose to tell this story, I will fall on the side of the fence where I never recover from this, or where I recover and go beyond what I was before. Thankfully, I fell on the right side of that fence, but it really opened my eyes to how much control almost I had in how I recovered from this, and not necessarily control in the sense of I could choose my perspective, or I could choose to be happy, or choose to feel as satisfied in this as I could had it been successful, but a choice and control in the sense of choosing to seek out support, choosing to do the difficult things to recover and really dig into my emotions and dig into my resiliency and dig into grief and really just sit wholeheartedly in those experiences of pain, so that I could come out of this recovered. The best advice I could give someone else who's considering to be a living donor is to keep journal entries or some way of tracking your experience. I really love that I can look back to all these different points in my story as to how I was feeling and what was drawing me into this decision and how I'm recovering after. I think it's really beautiful to document your story, because our brains are really bad at perceiving growth and change. And it's really beautiful to have these indications of your journey all the way along. So I really encourage people to document your journey, whether that be videos, writing, poetry, stories, whatever that looks like to you.